Well, hi there. This is a great white shark. My favorite shark. It is, in many ways, the ultimate shark alive today. Reaching sizes of nearly 6 meters, it is the largest extant shark that isn't a filter feeder. I do love the giant filter feeding sharks, but there is just something so special about a large, intelligent, actively predatory shark like the great white. While I still hold that the black-tipped reef shark is the most beautiful shark, the great white shark is, in my opinion, the most awesome to behold of any living shark. Though there are some other close competitors. I love them. And given that I just had the opportunity to see one for the first time, now seems like the right time to discuss the question on all of our minds. Is the great white shark a good pet? And is it the best pet fish for you? And is the great white shark a worse pet than our current low-score champion, the human child? And to answer these questions, we're going to have to give the great white shark a score based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the great white shark a score of 0 out of 5. That isn't to say that it's impossible. In fact, it's possible to handle relatively small sharks with your hands. That's not to say that they couldn't deliver a pretty nasty bite if you do it wrong, but it's definitely possible. They're well under 2 meters long when they're born. This footage, captured less than 2 years ago by the Malibu artist, one of the greatest content creators on YouTube, especially if you love great white sharks, shows the youngest great white ever filmed. It appears to be covered still in a uterine milk coating, suggesting that it was newly born at the time it was filmed. And this shark was about 1.5 meters long, which is not small. Great whites give live birth to a relatively small number of pups, with the most ever recorded in a pregnant female being just 14. That might sound like a lot, but for a water fish, it's hardly any. Some sturgeon lay upward of 2 million eggs at a time. But great whites produce just a handful of babies following a gestation time of nearly a year. And keep in mind, it may take females more than 30 years to reach maturity, so they don't produce many offspring. But their offspring are large enough, even at birth, to be a bit of a handful. And they're likely large enough to sever a hand pretty much right from the get-go. So that is something to keep in mind if you're wanting to pick one up. But it's only going to get worse from there. Males, which can be identified by the pair of claspers trailing behind the pelvic fins, tend to reach sizes of around 3.4 to 4 meters, which is about 11 to 13 feet in length and weigh well over 1,000 pounds. In other words, completely unhandleable. You could touch it at some risk to life and limb, but you're not going to be able to pick one up. And males are the little ones. Females tend to be in the range of about 4.6 to 4.9 meters, around 15 to 16 feet, and often weigh more than 2,000 pounds. Really big ones are over 6 meters long and weigh as much as 5,000 pounds. That's a 20-foot, 2.5-ton shark with teeth about this big, that is capable of throwing its entire body out of the water while grasping prey. In recent years, a lot of people have been successfully diving with large, potentially dangerous sharks, which they redirect by placing a hand on the rostrum while pushing them down and away. A useful technique, as sharks generally don't see humans as prey, but rather a curiosity. But given that they don't have hands and tend to explore curious objects with their mouths and teeth, an exploratory nibble from a big tiger shark is no joke. But this would be much worse. I've seen ocean Ramsey swim with large great whites. It's not impossible to interact with them and not die. They're not mindless killing machines, but they are killing machines. So if you don't have an exceptional understanding of the mind and behavior of large, actively predatory sharks, it could go exceptionally badly. In general, great white sharks are a look but don't touch kind of a pet. But at least they don't drop their tails. Alright, keeping a great white shark as a pet, probably not the best idea. But catching one from your couch? Now that's totally possible with Fishing Clash. This isn't just any fishing game. It's a full-on competitive adventure with real-time battles, epic boss fish, and brag-worthy catches. There are over 50 breathtaking fishing spots, lagoons, fjords, tropical reefs, all recreated in stunning detail. Whether you're competing in clan wars, chasing down monster fish, or just casting a line to relax, Fishing Clash delivers a unique experience every time you play. You can build the ultimate fishing arsenal with rare lures, upgraded rods, and legendary gear. And yes, the great white shark is in there, one of the game's legendary fish, and definitely not easy to catch. The best part? Fishing Clash is easy to pick up. Just tap, cast, and catch. You can jump in for a quick 5-minute session or spend hours exploring exotic waters. Totally up to you. Once you land that first big catch, you'll see why 50+ million players are hooked. Hit the link below or scan the QR code on screen to download Fishing Clash for free. And here's a gift for our fans. Use my code CLINT to claim a $20 reward. That's Clint to score exclusive gear, a custom avatar, or more to kick off your fishing journey. When you reel in something epic, drop it in the pinned comment below. Again, big thanks to Fishing Clash for sponsoring this video. Check them out. When it comes to care, we give the great white shark a score of 0 out of 5. There was a time when it seemed entirely impossible, which is probably why not even Bond villains keep them.
Today is the first day of the rest of your life.
The truth is that there are no captive great whites being kept anywhere on Earth. Until 2003, only one great white kept in captivity had ever fed. The rest had all either died after a few hours or days, or been released due to failure to feed and other health-related problems. The one that fed in Australia survived for 10 days before it was shot to death in front of paying customers. Yeah, they sold tickets to its execution because it was too aggressive towards divers to keep in the tiny tank in which they had it and too difficult to recapture and move. So every attempt to keep great whites in captivity had been a complete and total failure, which probably makes my 0 out of 5 score make sense. That said, between 2003 and 2011, the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California kept a series of smaller great white sharks, mostly in their million-gallon Outer Bay exhibit. These sharks fed and grew considerably over the several months that many of them were kept. But there were a few problems. One, and rather unshockingly for reasons that we will discuss shortly, they started eating some of the other inhabitants, including the other sharks in the exhibit. But two, they seemed to all receive noticeable rostral damage as a result of colliding with objects in the exhibit. The longest that they ever kept a single shark was 198 days. And to this day, and despite additional attempts, no other aquarium has had any real success housing a great white shark. Monterey Bay Aquarium say that they have no intention to attempt to do so again. They say that their previous attempts were about gaining knowledge, and now that that knowledge has been obtained, there's no reason to attempt to do so again. So nobody has one, but I would honestly be shocked if nobody tries again. And in case that is you, here are some simple, important facts to consider. They need a lot of space. 1 million gallons does not seem to be adequate even for a larger juvenile, let alone an adult. Great white sharks are obligate ram ventilators. This means that they need to swim perpetually to get enough oxygen to survive. Night and day they need to swim. Many cover distances of thousands of miles every year in the wild. Even while resting, as much as is possible, they must continue to swim. In general, sharks that spend considerable time swimming do better in round enclosures. And bigger will clearly be better. The Georgia Aquarium currently houses its whale sharks in its 6.3 million gallon Ocean Voyager exhibit. That might not be large enough either, but seems like a start. Obviously, to obtain and maintain that much saltwater, your aquarium probably needs to be near the ocean. That'd be a heck of a lot of instant ocean, probably more than exists. And you will also probably need to be near where juvenile white sharks are often encountered, as they probably won't do well being transported long distances before being introduced into the aquarium. The water needs to be cool, but not too cool, though larger sharks will do better in cooler waters than will juveniles. In general, great whites are found in waters between 12 and 24 degrees Celsius, which is about 54 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 285 to 297 kelvins. Keep in mind that great white sharks have partial endothermy, and so they can't have it too cold and maintain a proper body temperature. As adults, they feed on a lot of marine mammals, especially pinnipeds, which is why they're so common in places like near Seal Island off the coast of South Africa. A place I can now say from experience is covered in fur seals. That said, juveniles tend to feed much more on other cartilaginous fishes like skates, rays, and other sharks. So if you have other sharks in your aquarium, and your great white shark starts to eat them, you should be about as shocked if it eats them as you would be if you tried to keep a baby Burmese python with your king cobra. That's what they eat. What did you think was going to happen? They seem to do well on a diet of large marine fishes as juveniles. And those that have fed in captivity have grown at a rate faster than we would estimate to be typical of wild sharks. Just keep it varied and probably include other elasmobranchs as often as possible. Of course, if you're far more successful than anybody else in history, you will eventually need a diet rich in large marine mammals. You might be able to use other mammal prey, but nobody knows if that will work or not. So probably start a major pinniped farm now, which is going to require a lot of fish. And keep in mind that doing basic maintenance in the aquarium, like cleaning the glass, is going to become an increasingly dangerous activity as time goes on. This is a giant mammal-eating super predator that associates you with food. Target training will help, but as much as I love great whites, I would be reluctant to volunteer to climb into a box with such a creature. Realistically, there's only one known way to keep great white sharks successfully over long periods of time, and that is to keep them in the ocean and protect their natural habitat. And when you want to go see them underwater, put yourself in the cage. There is, at this point in time, no other place to see them. And that is why the most dangerous creature in the ocean, Dave Kaufman, was recently able to persuade me to accompany him to South Africa to dive with these, my favorite of all sharks. As well as attend the amazing SOS Reptile Expo, go on safari, get closer to elephants and especially lions than I dreamed was survivable, and have an adventure that I am excited to share with you over the coming months. But seeing great whites in the wild has, for as long as I can remember, been my biggest animal-related bucket list item. This is a top 5 favorite animal on Earth for me, and the only one I had never seen. I've spent considerable time with gorillas, even more time with snapping turtles. I've even seen a sperm whale in the wild, though I saw my first baleen whale as we were heading out to find the great whites. A bride's whale, the closest living relative of the blue whale, which has to be a bucket list animal for me as well. The blue whale, that is. But heck, I'd seen more of a Tyrannosaurus Rex in person than I had great white sharks. So it isn't just limited to my favorite extant animals. And the truth is that I had never before seen a wild shark of any kind. Many rays, including a giant stingray that we saw in the harbor as we headed out, but never a shark. And sharks might be my favorite group of extant animals. Though obviously reptiles give them a real run for their money. But needless to say, if you wanted to lure a Clint to the other side of the world, the promise of seeing a great white shark for the first time was probably the best bait that you could imagine. Unless you have a non-avian dinosaur, or we're going to hang out with the Irwins. So I hopped on a plane, and some 24 hours later, I was there. South Africa, that is. We wouldn't actually be on the boat for another couple of weeks. But once the day arrived, it was time to head out. In the past, we would have probably searched for great whites in the relatively warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean near Cape Town. However, it was our understanding that there's a real problem with the great whites in that area, namely that something has been stealing their livers.
Yes? Hello, can we have your liver? I'm using it.
That something being a pod of orcas that have become somewhat expert at incapacitating great white sharks and surgically removing and eating their livers. Wherever these orcas occur, the white shark population seems to virtually disappear. Hopefully because the sharks are avoiding the area and not because they have all been killed. But whatever the case may be, it sounds like there aren't very many sharks at all on the Atlantic side. And given that we would have, at most, 2 opportunities to see sharks, we chose to drive to the town of Mossel Bay and search for them instead in the colder waters of the Indian Ocean. And they were cold, though it was not as devastatingly cold as I had feared, at least in a wetsuit. At least once I remembered to zip it up. Honestly, though I'm probably more afraid of sharks, which I love, than is truly reasonable, I was far more concerned about the cold than I was about the sharks. I just wanted to see one. Mossel Bay is home to one of the 2 famous seal islands in South Africa. That island, as you can see, is literally littered with a preposterously plentiful population of pinnipeds. I mean, have you ever seen so many pinnipeds playing or precariously perched and piled in one place? I would propose that you probably can't pick a point where you have personally perceived such a plethora of pinnipeds prior to the present. I certainly can't place a previous point. But they weren't just there. They were all over the place. just playing and jumping in the water. And without much orca activity, this seemed like the most probable place to find my bucket list animal. But there are no guarantees. It is not uncommon to go out for many hours and not see a single shark. But we had to try. So off we set to find them. We went out with an outfit called White Sharks Africa, who were really pleasant, passionate, and knowledgeable about white sharks. They participate in a lot of research and have been instrumental in producing many of the best documentaries on white sharks that have come out in the last many years. As we traveled, we saw fur seals leaping and jumping all along the way. We saw the aforementioned bride's whale, which alone would have made the trip worth taking. But I knew that there was a very real chance that I would end the day still having never seen a great white shark, or perhaps any shark in the wild. And I would try not to feel too disappointed if this turned out to be the case. But as we were getting close to the location the crew had selected for us to look for sharks, I happened to spot a small, recently deceased fur seal floating on the surface of the water. When the crew noticed it, they decided to drop anchor right by the little otariad and wait. This is a place where they're approved to use chum to lure the sharks to the area, though it is highly regulated, and so the amount of scent being cast into the water was not close to what I'd seen in documentaries growing up, where they would pour gallons of bloody horror into the sea. This was basically just seawater with a few chunks of fish mixed in. More of a soup than a bloody mess. And thus, we waited. And waited. Probably for about a half an hour we waited. And watched. And waited. The crew and a few of the other passengers had an excellent vantage point from the roof of the boat, and we could still see fairly well from the deck. However, if there was one place where you were unlikely to spot a shark, it was inside of the cabin having a little snack and talking to your friend Clint when you look over his shoulder and spot the unmistakable fin of a great white shark sticking out of the water. That is probably about the least likely way to spot a shark, especially a shark that nobody else has spotted from their host of superior vantage points. But after a wait that was long enough to make you wonder if today was going to be our day, that's exactly what happened. As Dave spotted not only the first shark of the day, but the largest white shark known to inhabit those waters. A glorious female, who then proceeded to investigate but not eat our little seal friend before grabbing the bait and then heading straight for the side of our boat right in front of us. An experience I doubt that I will ever forget. My first shark. And then she left. This shark was one of the sharks that had been tagged as part of their research. And she was known to be the largest, but also one of the most shy sharks in the area. She came in for one more pass around the boat, but then quickly moved on. If we were going to see a shark underwater, it was going to have to be another shark. But at least, no matter what happened next, I'd actually seen a great white shark. In person, with my own two eyes. And then, after just a few more minutes of waiting, a second shark appeared. This time, it took and ate the fur seal, which was quite a sight to behold. And after it finished off that little morsel, it began to move towards the boat. And it was time to get in the water. And oh my goodness, what an experience we had. Dave got in first, along with our amazing host Heidi, who made all of this possible. They got to see some amazing passes from this shark for a long time while I filmed from above. But right when it was my turn to get into the water, the shark left. And again, I was left to wonder if I was going to actually dive with the great white, or if that was going to have to remain on the bucket list. And then, it returned with a buddy. And the two of them put on quite a show for the better part of an hour. The sharks were so close that I could have reached out and touched them, though I decided to leave that on the bucket list for now. But my favorite shark, possibly my favorite animal, was right there, inches in front of me. One of the greatest animal-related experiences of my life, though, remarkably, probably not even the most insane one that I had on this trip. But I'll share that with you soon. Let's just say that I learned a lot about some of the most dangerous animals in Africa. At distances I didn't know that you could experience and survive. And don't worry, I remember that we still have some scores to give out, but this is one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. So let's just take a minute to enjoy some of the amazing things that came next.
Oh! Oh, me.
The big shot, eh?
Oh, me. Oh my. Oh. Oh my.
That's the money shot.
Clint, it's been an honor having you as a friend.
Huh?
There is something so visceral. Two great whites circling us right now. That was freaking fantastic!
Okay, now I think we can talk about hardiness. If you would like for us to make a full video about this experience, please let us know in the comments below. And I especially want to say thank you to our patrons on Patreon who made this possible. We get to do so many things, so many amazing things because of you guys. And the reality is, I probably could have made a video about great white sharks right here in the studio that would have gotten just as many views as this one will. But I want to show you guys amazing, amazing things, and our patrons on Patreon are the ones that make this possible. We also have a lot of really cool features as our way of saying thank you, including entire additional videos, and I can tell you the additional video for today, for this week, is spectacular. So if you're interested in seeing that or just supporting us making more content like this, please consider checking that out. When it comes to hardiness, it's a bit difficult to give these guys a score. Great white sharks are, in reality, extremely hardy animals. I keep promising a video on life history evolution, but these sharks demonstrate all of the hallmarks of an animal that experiences low levels of extrinsic mortality. In other words, this shark is the product of an environment that rarely kills them. It appears that they can live for more than 70 years. They don't even hit maturity until they're at least in their mid-20s, early 30s for females. And they produce relatively few but large offspring. So they mature at an old age and produce few but large and well-developed offspring. All patterns typical of organisms that are unlikely to be killed, where death is instead most likely to occur as a result of competition with their own species. Though this is the main reason that high levels of predation from things like orcas, and especially humans, can be absolutely catastrophic for their populations as a whole. They are adapted to a world essentially devoid of predators, but they're built to last. On top of that, they often sustain and survive fairly catastrophic injuries. This is especially true in females, which usually bear deep scars from shark courtship and mating, which can be a little rough when all you have to hang on with are some of the most formidable jaws and teeth in the animal kingdom. So these sharks are tough. Not many things can stand up against a motivated pod of orcas, so that can hardly be held against them. And all of that said, we're giving them a score of 0 out of 5 for hardiness. Because we're addressing them in captivity, and the reality is that most of the sharks have died in the first few days in captivity, sometimes just within hours. And even those that have done the best have shown signs of damage to their bodies as a result of not coping well with navigating the barriers present in a fairly confined space. But I really think that this is on us and not on the sharks. For example, in general, if you're going to introduce a new fish to an aquarium, you would attempt to gently remove it from its environment and put it in a bag of water from that environment for transport to the new environment. You would float the bag in the new environment for some time to allow the fish to slowly acclimate to temperature, and then slowly introduce water from the new environment so that the fish can acclimate to any differences in water parameters. This prevents the fish from being shocked and dying, something that happens with much more regularity if you do not follow this procedure. However, this is much less likely to happen when you're talking about an animal that weighs, in many cases, hundreds to thousands of pounds that was likely caught by a fisherman and then hauled to shore. Being a giant obligate ram ventilator, you can't really put it in a bag, so you probably put it on basically a big tarp, rush it to your enclosure, and toss the stressed, oxygen-deprived animal in, and then hope for the best. Are you surprised that they don't do well? The smaller the shark, probably the better we are at all of this. So baby sharks tend to be the ones that do the best. And of course, only at aquaria close to their native habitat. Transporting one far inland is likely almost impossible at this point in time. And 1 million gallons just appears to be too small for a great white shark of pretty much any size. And we know almost nothing about their mating habits, as they were never observed at all until very recently. But I suspect that if you could get a captive bred shark and developed a better way to transport and acclimate them, and then put them in a much larger enclosure, that we would find them to be very hardy indeed. In fact, I suspect that this would even be true for wild-caught sharks, depending on how they were collected. So I'm sticking with a 0, but I think that it is possible to do better. And though this would require significant investment on the part of whatever aquarium decided to take it on, I do think that the ticket sales that would likely be generated by a large, healthy great white might just justify them. I even think that the amount that we would likely learn and how such an animal could improve public concern for the preservation of the species in the wild could greatly benefit sharks in much the same way that public exhibition of orcas changed their public image. So there's even an ethical argument for such an endeavor. But for now, 0. When it comes to availability, we give the great white shark a score of 0 out of 5. That is, unless you're willing to go to where they are. If you want to be the one in the cage, I would say it would be more like a 4. In the right places, you can see them most of the time if you go look for them. But in captivity, it's virtually impossible to get one. Not impossible. It has been done, and probably will be done again, but almost impossible. You're going to need a serious, likely officially sanctioned aquarium with a huge 1 million-plus gallon exhibit on the coast where great whites occur naturally. And you're probably going to have to make a good case to one or more regulatory bodies why you should have one. And then you will have to wait for one to be captured by someone who knows what to do with it well enough to get it to you with a legitimate chance of survival. Not impossible, but close. 0. Which puts us at a 0 out of 5 with just one category left. A lower score than the human child unless they get at least a 3 out of 5 for that category. And the last category is upfront costs, which are going to require an aquarium of well over 1 million gallons. The Outer Bay exhibit, which is too small in our assessment for a great white shark, cost $56 million to build in the mid-1990s. Though I would estimate that you could probably do it somewhat cheaper in South Africa, but it might be harder to recuperate your costs. You'll need tons of access to ocean water. You'll need land on the coast, a lot of it, and a pinniped breeding facility somewhere in the vicinity, as there is no such thing as Pinniped Pro, who will send you a box of frozen seals and sea lions through the mail. Not to mention legal fees and other costs associated with cutting through the red tape, insurance, licensing. They're not getting a 3. In fact, we have long had a policy of giving any animal that costs more than $100 million a score of 0 out of 5. And given that the Georgia Aquarium, with its 6.3 million gallon aquarium, which is probably more like what would be needed, would likely cost around $500 million to build today, they are definitely going to be a 0. Not impossible if you own the most successful electric car company, a major social media platform, and a space program, but out of reach for most of us. That said, I was within an arm's reach of these most incredible animals just over a week ago. And once you get to Mossel Bay, it only costs a little over $100 to go out and see them. Probably a bit more in places like Australia and California. but a bit more reasonable for those of us that don't routinely find $1 billion in our couch cushions. And that is why, overall, we give the great white shark the lowest score that we have ever given to any animal on this channel. Even lower than to human children. The lowest score possible to receive. A 0.0 out of 5. But if what you want is the most impressive and infamous shark on the planet, and money is literally no object, then the great white shark might be the best pet fish for you. But if you're just a run-of-the-mill Bond villain, these might be a bit more your speed. And if you're just a person that loves sharks and want one that isn't wholly unreasonable, then you should watch this video right now. Or this one, if you want to know more about white sharks and their relatives. Because great white sharks are not the only white sharks alive today. I guess all I'm saying is that you probably can't have a great white shark. But that's okay. They can still fill your life with joy and wonder, as they do mine. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. And please check out Dave Kaufman's video on this adventure right now.
So they caught it.
Yep.
They put it in the big tank.
Yep.
It then
A sort of big tank, not really a very big tank.
it then turned aggressive.
Yeah, or was aggressive.
It
I mean,
was
the
aggressive.
reality is,
They're like, oh crap.
yeah,
What do we do?
catch a big great white shark, put it in a box. Previous to that, none of them were feeding, so those were probably not very scary.
And that one fed,
That one fed.
but it would have fed on the divers.
Yeah. And I don't know what your plan is after that. Like,
And so they're like, oh crap, it's aggressive. We can't get rid of it humanely.
yeah,
So let's get rid of it and sell
in an
tickets.
exhibition.
So it wasn't that they shot it accidentally in front of paid customers. They'd paid to see it killed.
Yep.
Wow.
They had to shoot it like 7 times or something too. Like, it's real stupid.
You gotta have a exit plan.
It's gotta be up there on the levels of stupid with the elephant they hanged.
What was, I don't remember.
It
this.
killed somebody, and so they sentenced it to death by hanging, and then they hung it in front of people. It's
Hung.
and I think the person that it had killed like had it coming. You know, it was one of those people that like tried to attack the elephant or whatever. You know.
As you do.
Yeah. What could I do today?
Rode a bike into it.
Well, I'm right. I'm between two options that I have. Option number one, I'm gonna go try to swim with the orca that has killed the most people, or I could attack this elephant. And people tried both of those things.
It was a circus elephant.
Mm-hmm. And to the plane.
Frickin' plane, trains, and automobiles.
That's right. No problem from whales though.
Was that lady that?
Yeah. Stupid whales. Go to bed. Sleep in here. Stupid whales splashing around out there. Ridiculous. I've said about getting that AA turret in for I don't know how long. Just one SAM launcher would really go a long way.
Suddenly there's a no-fly zone.
Yeah. Can we just get that's more humane. Can we just get a no-fly zone put in?
But the train just like move on.
Yeah, it just sits there and whistles.
Just get out of town. Man.
And in some of these shots we got, like Seal Island. It's just this little island out there. You would never know.
Yeah.
We flew that drone out there. Holy cow! That island is covered in fur seals. And the waters around it are just teeming with, like, just bubbling with fur seals. There's hundreds or thousands of fur seals on that island. It's crazy. It's like, oh, that's why the sharks are here. All right. Is that car on the roof?
Surgically removing with their teeth.
Yes. But they do it with, like, surgical precision. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah. Which can be hard on them.
Clint, it's been an honor having you as a friend.
I was so excited I jumped in with it unzipped still and it was started to flood. I'm like, oh, that's cold. I never got my hood on. What are you going to do? In fact, we have long had a policy of giving any animal that costs more than $100 million a score of 0 out of 5.
It's our policy.
It's the policy.
Like, we have it written down.
Even I am not above the policy. But they have a perfect record of people not getting attacked by sharks.
Yeah, that was their second dive. So,
Well, they said, so if any of you get an arm bitten off, we can't bring any of you back. There can't be any witnesses. Probably a joke.
They got to keep it perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.